Okay, so here's something wild. The London Stock Exchange, yeah, the London Stock Exchange, just launched a blockchain settlement network. And we're talking about $3.6 trillion in tokenized assets. I mean, that's not some crypto startup announcing a testnet, right? That's legacy finance rebuilding their entire infrastructure. And honestly, that's just one of five massive institutional blockchain stories that dropped this month. Let me break down what's actually happening here. All right, so first up, and this is huge for anyone following Ripple, they just secured preliminary approval for an electronic money institution license in Luxembourg. Now, you might be thinking, okay, another license, who cares? But here's why this actually matters. So on January 14th, Ripple got what's called a green light letter from Luxembourg's financial regulator, the CSSF. And this came just 5 days after they got their UK FCA approval. Now, here's the thing. Under MiCA regulations, this single license lets Ripple operate across all 27 EU member states. That's called passporting, right? So think about it this way. Instead of getting 27 different approvals, they get one golden ticket. And what can they actually do with this? Well, they can issue electronic money, which means stablecoins like RLUSD. They can hold client funds. They can process payments as a fully regulated entity, not just a technology provider. And here's where it gets really interesting. Ripple is positioning themselves inside Target 2, which is the European Central Bank's main payment system. We're talking trillions of euros in daily transactions flowing through that system. So when people ask, will banks actually use this stuff? I mean, they're literally plugging into the central bank's infrastructure. Ripple's Luxembourg EMI license isn't just regulatory checkbox. It's a passport to operate as a licensed payment institution across the entire European Union, positioning them inside the ECB's core payment infrastructure. All right, switching gears here because this next one, honestly, this might be the biggest institutional blockchain story of the year so far. The London Stock Exchange Group just launched something called the Digital Settlement House, and it's running on the Canton network. Okay, so January 15th, LSEG flips the switch on Dish. That's Digital Settlement House. And what this thing does is pretty remarkable. It enables 24/7 instantaneous settlement using tokenized commercial bank deposits. So, not crypto tokens, actual bank money, tokenized and moving on blockchain rails. Now, the Canton network itself, this isn't some random chain, right? This was built by a consortium including Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Börse, BNP Paribas, and Digital Asset. It's specifically designed for regulated financial institutions with privacy features baked in. And here's what really caught my attention. 11 major global banks took a 20% stake in LSEG's post-trade division back in October. We're talking Bank of America, JP Morgan, Citi, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, UBS. Basically the who's who of global finance. They're not just customers, they're equity investors in this infrastructure. The Canton network now hosts over $3.6 trillion in tokenized assets. And the whole point is atomic settlement, meaning the cash and the securities move at the exact same moment. No more waiting 2 days for trades to settle, which, in 2026 seems kind of crazy that we were ever doing it the old way. LSEG's digital settlement house represents traditional finance, literally rebuilding settlement infrastructure on blockchain, with 11 of the world's largest banks as equity stakeholders, not just users. Okay, now let's talk about another big Ripple story. because they've been busy this month. On January 15th, Ripple and LMAX Group announced a multi-year strategic partnership, and there's $150 million attached to this deal. So LMAX, for those who don't know, is one of the biggest institutional trading venues out there. They processed $8.2 trillion in volume last year. That's trillion with a T. They serve top-tier banks, hedge funds, professional liquidity providers. Now what's happening here is Ripple is investing $150 million to support LMAX's cross-asset growth. But the really interesting part, RLUSD, that's Ripple's stablecoin, is being integrated as core collateral across LMAX's entire trading infrastructure. So we're talking spot crypto, perpetual futures, CFDs, all of it. And here's why this matters for traditional finance. RLUSD becomes a settlement currency and margin collateral. So institutional traders can use it 24/7 across multiple asset classes. You can't do that with traditional fiat, right? Banks close, wire transfers take time. But with RLUSD as collateral, you've got continuous access. David Mercer, the LMAX CEO, said this reflects, quote, confidence and momentum in their cross-asset growth strategy. And honestly, when you see a venue doing $8 trillion in annual volume integrating a stablecoin at this level, that's not experimentation anymore. That's infrastructure. The Ripple LMAX partnership isn't just about trading crypto. It's about using stablecoins as institutional grade collateral and settlement infrastructure, enabling 24/7 cross asset operations that traditional fiat simply cannot provide. All right, now let's shift to Asia because something really significant is happening in Japan. On January 14th, Quant Network announced a strategic partnership with Dentsu Soken to build tokenized deposit infrastructure for Japanese banks. So, Dentsu Soken, they're not some small tech firm, right? They've been building mission critical payment systems for Japanese banks since 1975. They created the settlement system that connects to BOJNet, which is the Bank of Japan's core payment infrastructure. Now, Quant is bringing their Overledger technology, which is basically a universal API that connects legacy banking systems with blockchain networks. It's not a blockchain itself, it's the bridge between old and new. And here's the context that makes this really interesting. Japan's three largest banks, Mizuho, MUFG, and Sumitomo Mitsui, just got regulatory approval for a stablecoin trial. We're talking $6.8 trillion in combined assets. They're launching by March 2026. Gilbert Verdian, the Quant CEO, said the technology is now, quote, proven and compliant as banks prepare for tokenized deposits. And Dentsu Soken's executive called 2026 a, quote, pivotal moment for stablecoin evolution in Japan. So you've got proven central bank technology from Quant's work with the Bank of England and European Central Bank now being deployed in the world's third largest economy. That's not a pilot program, that's production infrastructure. Quant's partnership with Dentsu Soken brings central bank validated blockchain technology to Japan's banking system, connecting to BOJNet infrastructure as the country's largest banks prepare to launch tokenized deposits. All right, last section, and I want to zoom out to look at the broader institutional adoption picture for XRP specifically, because the ETF numbers here are actually pretty remarkable. So XRP ETFs have now pulled in $1.37 billion in cumulative inflows. And here's the crazy part. They went 35 consecutive days without a single outflow. That's a record for any crypto ETF, including Bitcoin. We now have 7 spot XRP ETFs trading in the US: Canary, Bitwise, Franklin, Grayscale, 21 Shares, Rex, Osprey. And this became the second fastest crypto ETF category to reach 1 billion after Bitcoin itself. Now, Standard Chartered's analyst Jeffrey Kendrick put out a model projecting XRP could hit $8 by end of 2026. That's based on ETF inflows reaching 10 billion. Whether you agree with that target or not, the institutional flow data is pretty hard to argue with. And when you combine this with the 300 plus banks already on RippleNet, the new EU and UK licenses, the LMAX integration, you start to see a picture where XRP isn't just a speculative asset anymore. It's becoming embedded in actual financial infrastructure. Now look, most of those banks use RippleNet for messaging, not XRP directly for liquidity. That's an important distinction. But the regulatory clarity from the SEC settlement, the ETF approvals, the institutional partnerships, the trajectory here is pretty clear. XRP ETF inflows of 1.37 billion with 35 days of zero outflows signals a fundamental shift in institutional perception. From speculative asset to infrastructure play backed by regulatory clarity and expanding bank partnerships. So look, here's the bottom line. We're watching traditional finance actively rebuild their infrastructure on blockchain technology. The London Stock Exchange, major European banks, Japanese megabanks, institutional trading venues, they're not debating IF anymore. They're building now. Ripple alone announced EU and UK licenses, a $150 million LMAX partnership, and expanded bank integrations, all in the first 2 weeks of January. That's not speculation, that's execution. The question isn't whether institutions will adopt blockchain. The question is how fast the infrastructure gets built out. And based on what we're seeing, pretty fast. If this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening with institutional blockchain adoption, hit that subscribe button. I cover these deep dives every week on the news that actually matters. And drop a comment. Which of these 5 stories surprised you the most? I genuinely want to know what you're watching.